Ferndale guest
Yeah.
with a capital F.
Yes.
Yeah, Justin's not here.
He's here, he just ran out for a minute.
I've never had luck with that. It's nice.
I apologize now if my computer goes.
I hope the recording was on for that.
We are recording.
That's called TMI.
Not video.
Oh, I have notes. I have notes.
All right. This is a meeting of the City of Ferndale's Board of Zoning Appeals on October 30th, 2018. The meeting is coming to order at 7:01 p.m. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-judicial body authorized by Section 24-421 of the City of Ferndale's Code of Ordinances. The BZA is a body of limited powers. We're restricted by the zoning ordinance and by Michigan law. The BZA is authorized to interpret the zoning ordinance and the zoning map, hear and decide appeals made by administrative officials or bodies charged with enforcing the ordinance, and analyze variance requests as permitted under the ordinance. The BZA does not have the power or the authority to amend the zoning ordinance or to disregard its provisions or rezone parcels of land. Do I have a motion from anyone to approve the agenda for tonight?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Support.
All right, moved by Palmer, supported by Pollica. All in favor say aye.
Hi.
Aye. And has everyone on the board had an opportunity to review the minutes? Oh, let's do a roll call, actually. I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me.
Hold on 1 second. Commissioners Deasy,
Here.
Shapiro, Colson,
Here.
Porter is not here, Steidemann,
Here.
Moore. Here. Palmer,
Here.
Pollica,
Here.
and Williamson.
Here. All right, roll call out of the way. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting?
Yes, through the chair, I've got a couple corrections.
Sure, go ahead.
Halfway down, it says Williamson is their something. I think it's something. I think the M is missing.
Good catch.
And then I also noted, I wanted to ask a question because Bob Porter had made a comment. What are true conditions?
Where are you looking?
I think it was in the same spot. Bear with me.
Okay.
1 second. I don't remember him using the word true conditions as the thing. Hang on. It's probably right after that one. Shoot.
It seemed like, if I remember, he was talking about the unique, what makes the property unique, so possibly unique conditions.
Okay. But it said true conditions, and then there was another one that says,
I see what you're saying. Yes, financial design or inconvenience isn't a true condition. And Justin,
I was just verifying, that's all.
yeah, Justin, I think you're probably right that that was unique condition.
Okay.
Of course, we don't have
Bob here to say.
Bob here to confirm that for us, so maybe we leave this for now, and maybe we.
And I have one more,
Okay, what's the next one?
sorry.
That's okay.
It says Williamson. Now I need to find that one too. But anyway, it says can't ornate. What does that mean? Bless you. Can't ornate. I couldn't highlight it on here, that's why.
Would it be demonstrate, perhaps?
Here it is. No, that's ordinance. Hang on. I wish I could have highlighted this as I was reading it, but this is not a Word document, so
Would it be can't originate?
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I think it was can't originate.
And then it says ornate.
Okay.
Got it.
I just can't find it right now, sorry.
All right, with those corrections noted, would anyone make a,
I found it,
yeah, can't originate.
yeah.
Would anyone care to make a motion to approve the minutes as corrected?
I move to approve the minutes from the June 26th meeting as amended, as corrected.
I'll second that.
Okay, and to clarify, this would be to correct the spelling of something, to note that Bob Porter was talking about a unique condition as opposed to a true condition, and that I was talking about originate as opposed to ornate. Is that clarification consistent with your motion, Greg?
Yes.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
I'll abstain as I was not present.
Sure, with one abstention, Commissioner Stedeman. All right, we have two public hearings on the agenda for today. The first is the matter of 561 Livernois. This is a request for a use variance, which is not something that we see very often here at the Board of Zoning Appeals. We have a request for a use variance to permit a single-family residential use in a former residential structure that has been converted to a commercial use in an MXD2 zoning district. Let's take a minute to hear from staff, to hear from Justin what you have to say about the request.
Good evening. Just wanted to provide a few notes just based on what was provided in the packet. So the applicant is proposing a use variance at 561 Livernois. The site is zoned mixed use 2 currently. It has been that way, zoned mixed use 2 at least since 2010. The current master plan included a future land use map in the master plan, and that does also call for mixed use going forward. The applicant's proposing would like the potential to permit a single family residential use on the site, and they'll talk more about that. As far as the ordinance goes, there in the permitted uses chart in mixed use zoning, there are single family dwellings that are permitted if they are in existence at the time of the ordinance. However, once that site has been, or that use has been converted to something else, right now on site is a retail shop, and then at the rear of the site is a fitness studio, gym. But once, at least in the ordinance as it currently states right now, once a residential structure on site has been converted to a commercial use, that's where that change from what's permitted, it's converted to something else that's been prohibited, or converted to something else that's permitted, that there's a prohibition on reestablishment of a non-conforming use. As Chair Williamson stated, this is our first use variance, at least in my time here. For a while, they weren't even permitted to be reviewed. And so as you move forward and as you think about if there is a motion to approve a use variance, a 2/3 vote of the body is required to go forward. I'm here to answer any questions.
All right, thanks, Justin. Yeah, give me a minute. Justin, I probably do have some questions for you, but let's hear from the applicant first, actually. If the applicant wants to approach.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rosano Rea. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I was here a couple of years ago speaking in favor of the Axel Brewery, which has proven to be a good establishment next to my gym facility. I've been the owner of the business located at 561 Livernois for since we opened about 2002. It's been great serving the Ferndale community. It's a great town. It's been a pleasure seeing it grow. In recent years, as a near 40, I'll be 40 in March, I decided to go into law enforcement late in life and went to the police academy, got out and got a job with the Genesee County Sheriff's Office, which I proudly serve now out in Genesee County, Flint area, and I'm engaged to a wonderful nurse out there. The drive is about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the day and traffic. I don't get to the gym very often anymore. It's grown increasingly hard to, as a personal trainer of 20 years, and I used to have 8 or 9 clients there, a day. But switching careers has, working 40-hour plus weeks has just been increasingly hard to get over here, and I find that I'm really only here on Saturdays for a couple people. My mother, Anna, beautiful young lady sitting beside me, or behind me here, she's the owner of the gym, owner of the property, and I'm the so-called manager and owner of the actual business. She helps me out a great deal, managing the few trainers that we have. But as somebody who's getting a little older, and not too much older, but slightly older, and myself who can rarely get over here, we have decided to put the place up for sale. It's been up for a while, and we've had a few interests on there, but it's been a little difficult to sell it because of the fact that it is basically set up like a house. There's a house in the front, as you know, a driveway, and then the gym dwelling in the back. We kept it green for a reason. A, it helps me out to train clients there without having it be a big parking lot on the lawn, but it also added to the aesthetic element of the property there, which we've always tried to keep up for the community and for ourselves. But those who have asked about it have inquired, but were disinterested when they found out they couldn't, by law, live in that front building. Parking is an issue there. We had 6 people in the driveway the other day, and we were shuffling in and out. And I do see as a business that's not our type of business going in there might be problematic to sell as a selling point, seeing that there's no proper parking on it. And we feel that a gallery owner or somebody who would take care of the building, and we wouldn't just sell it to anybody. We would be pretty particular and make sure the business is, somebody that would take care of it. Could be a gallery owner in front, live in the place, make it a cool little place with their business in the back, making it easy for them to exit the premises through the door there and just be right out in the backyard there with their clients and whatever they choose to put back there. But that's my stance. I'd really appreciate your vote in our favor on this. I understand it's something that's different to ask for, and I would love to be here another 20 years. It's just our profits have gone, with my not being there as the face of the product of a small gym, the profits have gone down quite a bit, and it's grown increasingly hard for my mom to have to drive down and manage what little we have over there. I just don't think in her retirement years that it's fair to ask her to do that. And my realtor will speak as well as far as, other things that, you guys can talk in more of a lingo. But just from a layman's perspective on my stance, that would be most appreciative, a vote in our favor. And it's been wonderful being in Ferndale here. It's not something I it's been a big decision to make to have to do this, but I believe it would help in the sale of the property if we could do a mixed, live-work situation. So it's a pleasure speaking with everybody and to our better halves over here. Any questions? But I'm sorry.
First, Rossano, thanks for being a great member of the community for the years that you've been here.
Pleasure.
We've appreciated having you. We're sorry to lose your business, but we understand, people's lives change. Congratulations on the engagement and the new career path.
I appreciate that.
I think we are probably going to have some questions for you, but I do have a couple that I want to address to Justin first to clarify some things, if you don't mind. So if you stick close by so you can jump back up when we need you.
Can we just stand right here?
Actually, you can have a seat, because
Okay.
we have a couple, I have a couple that I want to pose to Justin, and some of the other board members may as well. Thank you. Justin, the first thing I'm curious about is that when I look at the permitted uses for the mixed-use districts, a home business is a permitted use in the mixed-use district. Why is there a problem with someone operating this property as a home business where they're living in the front portion and running a business out of the back portion?
There's really not an issue with that. So what was communicated to me was more of if someone wanted to use this 100% as a single-family dwelling, not mixed. And so we talked about a number of the residential options that are permitted there. So the main thing was that the house being converted to a retail shop as it is now, that is where it changes, where you couldn't really use that front home as a single-family home. So if it was split up into using that home as a, living there and having a business in there, that would work, but not just having a solo single-family home.
I've took a drive by there, and I've also taken a look at the property on Google Maps, and what I can't tell is, are the two buildings on the parcel connected, or are they separate?
I think they're separate as far as separate.
Okay, if there were a corridor built between these two buildings, so that they were connected and they were one building, how would that change the calculus? At that point, would there be an ability to use the front piece entirely as a home, but it could still qualify as a home business with the business portion being in the back part of the building?
Potentially, I can kind of look that up while we're discussing. I could see that being a possibility.
Okay, it seems like that might be a low-cost way of fixing the whole problem, just by constructing a corridor. Let me see, let me open it up to some of the other board members, see if other people have questions.
Through the chair, I have some clarifying questions along a similar line. My main issue in really understanding sort of the request before us had to do similarly with the conversion between business and residential. And so I was reading the ordinance and the permitted uses, I noticed that the ordinance spells out the one permitted use for single-family residential as dwellings in existence at the time of adoption of the ordinance. So for me, I guess this case is coming from the interpretation of the meaning of the word dwelling, just to be attached to the fact that people lived in that building. But I'm curious about the interpretation. Ian reads for us every time, before we start, the fact that we're allowed to interpret the law. And when I read that law, I was really interpreting that specific permitted use. To me, it seemed that the intent behind listing that in the ordinance might have been specifically for situations like this, and that did the people who wrote the ordinance truly intend dwelling to be literally interpreted to mean people living in the house, or did they potentially mean the actual structures? And maybe somebody with more history on the board and who was around at the time of the adoption of the ordinance could speak to the intent of that specific permitted use?
Sure. So that was my question as well. I mean, that's not in many of the other commercial districts. So the city attorney's interpretation was that that's where the non-conforming uses ordinance came into play as well. Non-conforming uses 24-363, and item number 5 in there is is what he called out specifically as prohibition of reestablishment. So if someone would have, if that front building would have stayed a single-family dwelling use the entire time, we wouldn't have this conversation right now. But that was his interpretation of it.
Further questions?
Yeah.
Did you have any follow-ups?
Yeah, I was trying to quickly get into Municode to look up the one that you're referencing, the non-conforming part, because I guess that non-conforming is why I bring up the issue. I guess in my mind, you know, typically when a new ordinance is adopted, any use in existence is still allowed anyways, because it was there before the ordinance. So the fact that it specifically spelled out, you know, called out, except for dwellings in existence, to me said that potentially the people that were crafting that ordinance might have meant dwelling to mean, you know, the structures, in addition to the fact that people were dwelling in the structures. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. That wasn't what was relayed to me. Because that was my exact question. And I think if that was crafted in a different way, maybe it would have helped all of us and been a little bit clearer. But that's the way the city attorney interpreted it, and that's what I've been going with.
Just to, I know I have a couple of other questions, but just to clarify this a little bit further. So is it the situation that at the time the existing zoning ordinance was passed, it was already being used as a commercial property where no one was living there and it was being used as a shop at that time?
I don't know when someone moved into the front space. I don't have the C of O. That's something I can get, but since that time, I don't know if there was someone living in the front house or not. I feel like not, but yeah.
No, we've had, no, nobody was there. It's always just been kind of a storage area, and we also had a business that rented from us. Now, there was a school teacher allegedly years ago that lived there, Ferndale school teacher, way back in the day, before even the building in the back was erected. Not while we were there.
How about, do we know when the current version of the ordinance was passed, the year?
2010.
2010, okay.
And the master plan was 2008.
In 2010, Rossano, if you know this, in 2010, was the building materially altered in some way, or was it just basically a house that was sitting vacant with no one living in it?
No, it was, there's always been a bathroom in there. We've kept the kitchen in there for, we put new appliances in there. But we've always had something going on in there, but it was never a dwelling of a home, somebody living in there all the time.
What's the layout of the house, I guess? I mean, have walls been taken out so that there are no more bedrooms, or is it still laid out like a house?
It's laid out like a house. There's nice wood floors in there. It is accessible. We had a little ramp put in. There's 2 doors in the front now, so it's accessible to the right with a small ramp. There's a central living area, an office area, a TV space, and then coming off the kitchen, there is still a bathroom. They might have closed.
Well, I think there were 2 bedrooms.
Yeah, but there was never a wall there.
No.
The back bedroom still has the door. Or was
Yeah.
It's still, there's a closet back there. It's a house basically. Jadana uses it as her, we rent it out now as the retail shop, but that's the homeliness of it. It's like a little home in there.
Okay, was it a retail shop in 2010?
No, it was not.
Okay, was
It
it,
wasn't being used that way.
okay.
2010, I think we might have had
We had attorneys there,
an attorney and real estate.
3 of them.
Okay, so it was like basically office space at that point. Okay.
There's still a refrigerator, oven.
Through the chair, but you owned it through the change in the ordinance. So you owned it before 2010 and you owned it after the whole time.
Since 02.
So basically, prior to 2010, you could have used it as a residence, and after 2010, okay.
Yeah, we never did, but it was, we never went that option because I was going a route of maybe putting a yoga studio in there. I always wanted to kind of keep it a fitnessy type of a compound.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether it did or not was a different story, but.
Through the chair. So Justin, it's my understanding, not only did the codes change, but it also, once it changed from, even if it was used as a home, it's not currently used as a home. So because it changed to a commercial use, it cannot revert back.
Right.
Is what you're saying.
That's where the prohibition on reestablishment comes into play.
So my question to you is, how are we going to change that use if we're not allowed to?
I didn't make a recommendation either way,
But
but,
I'm just saying, I mean, I hate to be that blunt, but if we can't do it, we can't do it.
right.
I mean, if it's not allowed.
Right.
So, and I know that we have done, in my career of 22 years on this board, I think one use variance.
Right.
One.
Right. It's
hard.
Yeah, it is.
It's really
It-
hard.
It varies, and staff communicated that throughout the process, that it would be a challenge. Tried to talk through some solutions, but in the end, we didn't want to turn anyone away who wanted to apply.
Okay.
Did you have a,
Yeah, well, actually, that's what I was looking for. I was looking for the definition of mixed use too.
Now, is it, if there was, and I'm just saying because I'm trying to have an understanding, the mixed use two, because there's two different structures, is the code to both structures because it's on the same piece of land?
Right.
Okay.
So,
Through the chair, I just want to be 100% clear on this, and I apologize if this is repetitive, but, so they owned it before, it was not a residence before, the law changed, where they made note, like, would there have been, I'm just curious how this works, right? So the law changes, do they get some kind of notice saying, if you don't immediately make this a residence, you're going to lose all ability to have this as a residence?
No.
Or is the fact that it was already being used as commercial and stayed as commercial, like there was no change, it never changed since the ordinance was put into place? So that just makes me wonder, and I need to read more, right? But I'm curious, if it never changed, does that affect the way this can be interpreted?
I think I was up following you all the way to the end.
Are you saying the non-conforming use of
Well,
it? Is that what you're saying?
So it's saying if it becomes commercial use, you cannot go back to residential. But it never changed to commercial use after the law was or after the ordinance was passed. It already was commercial use, so it never changed. Nothing
Right.
changed.
Right.
So do
Prior
they still?
to, though, prior to, he would have been allowed to use it as a residential home.
Right.
Once it went to the mixed use, and because it was being used as a commercial property, it cannot revert to a residential use.
So he would have literally had to move in the day after the ordinance in order
the
to
day
keep that.
before?
The day before.
The day before. This is what Board Member Deasy was getting to earlier.
and I
If
get
it is
that.
a,
Yeah.
what is the definition of a dwelling? If it was still a house, was it a dwelling previously in existence at the time the ordinance changed?
Okay.
And it sounds
And that's
like
why I
the city
wondered.
attorney has weighed in on this and said that in his opinion, his interpretation is that it was not, because it was being used for a commercial purpose at the time, for an office purpose.
And that's why I asked if it was two separate buildings, or because it was on the same land. I wanted to see if they
Right.
would be looked at differently.
so through the chair, I wanted to just ask again. So I know Justin did reiterate clearly that it was the city attorney's interpretation of the law to mean that this did not, this was not an allowed use, but we're also tasked here with interpreting the law, so could we not interpret it differently? Because I'm still, and Justin, if you could reiterate the non-conforming, like the ordinance, I have Municode up now, so if you could reiterate the specific ones that you were citing, just so I can look at those, because I'm still struggling to really believe that this use shouldn't just be allowed.
I just want to say that when we first purchased, when the facility was purchased, that was the whole reason why I ended up buying a house on West Maplehurst Street, the cobblestone house, was that we were told I could not live there. So for whatever reason, I was never informed that if there was an option to live there, that certainly was never made clear to me, because I would have probably opted to do that rather than making a purchase on Maplehurst.
I'm sorry, what year did you purchase?
I believe it was 2002, 203. I thought it was before. I thought it was '02, but you'd know more than I would.
Yeah, looking at the ordinance for non-conforming structures or buildings, section 24-364, I'm not seeing any language in this ordinance that addresses the use. This appears to be a dimensional statute and not a use-based statute.
24-363.
363.
Note
okay.
5 was what we were.
Oh, wait,
referring
it's
to.
363, I think, non-conforming uses.
Yep.
All right, let's see.
Was there another question, Leah, that you had?
I just need to find
Okay.
that
I
one
need,
that you were
I'm
talking
gonna have to
about.
reference that in a second, so.
No problem.
24-365.
3.
So, to Justin, another question for staff. I noticed that MXD2 does allow multiple family dwellings. If they were to put a kitchenette in the basement of this property and put a separate entrance onto the basement, if there isn't already one there, would it qualify as a multiple family dwelling?
If that's, sounds like there's not a basement,
Crawl space? Okay.
but if you, I think probably some architect who's much more creative than me probably could also attach some, I think it's, what is the standard, 3 or more single-family attached dwellings? So if you reconfigure things, you could add 2 units to it and also make that be a residential option that would fit the site too.
Got it. It seems like the
That might be a stretch.
quicker and
but-
cheaper way to
Yeah.
do it might be to join the buildings together and work it in as a home business.
Well, and that's where my questioning comes into play. What is the definition of home business?
So there's a limitation on the types of uses. I just had it up. Tutoring,
include-
home offices, home studios, and so. it
Now,
has
when
to-
you say home offices, okay,
So-
I work from home once a week,
Yeah.
and I work at Ford Motor Company. Is that a
No,
home?
Greg, it has to be a full-time business.
It'd have to be a full-time business, so in the past, I think we've had, counselors, small, like one-person architect firms and stuff like that, so,
So
law
if-
firms.
If I bought the property, I moved in there, opened up a studio, lived there for a year with the studio went under, and I decided I wasn't gonna continue the business, then I would be forced out of my home just because I closed my business? I don't understand how law could force someone because they chose, if it was a live-work situation. So I guess I don't see how that can stand up.
I mean, it would probably be noted on the certificate of occupancy that this is, residential home with X business. Is someone checking on that sort of thing often in Ferndale? I doubt it. But that's my understanding of it. The other part of home business, it has to be, clearly incidental to the primary use, which is residential. So it doesn't have to be like a flashing sign outside that says Greg's Law Firm or.
It doesn't have to have a
whatnot.
Yeah,
sign
you
at
can
all.
have no,
Doesn't
you
have to have a
can't have a
sign.
sign
Yeah,
for a
that's
home
true,
business.
Yeah.
But.
So, through the chair, can Justin just tell us, because I've looked a few times through the different parts of the ordinance we're talking about, and like I did, so back to the definition of the word dwelling. Does our zoning ordinance define dwelling? Do we have a section?
Yes.
Okay, can you?
It layers up each, it breaks out single-family attached, duplex, multiple family, all of those. So there's like 6 or 7 areas where it talks about each type of dwelling.
Okay, so in the zoning ordinance, where would I find the definition of dwelling?
It's in definitions.
Because, like, I'm not trying to be, burr in anyone's side here, but I guess my issue is, like, when I just did a quick Google search, dictionary definition of dwelling, it was home, apartment, house. And so in that moment, I felt like it was really easy to interpret it either as, home, which is not a tangible place, it's the fact that you live there, or also, house, which is the structure. And so I'm still having a really hard time backing up the idea that living in that house isn't already allowed under our current zoning ordinance. And like, if I were to look at this from just like a risk mitigation standpoint, I feel that I guess what am I trying to say? Like, not allowing the use is a lot more murkier and potential lawsuity to me than allowing the use.
I'm just relaying what was interpreted,
Dan Christ?
what we came
Okay.
upon.
Okay,
So,
just because not that I doubt our city lawyer by any way, shape, or form. I mean, he's amazing. I know that he knows his stuff, but I wouldn't want to rely too heavily on the interpretation of just one lawyer when another lawyer can come in and argue the other side of it,
sure.
Who's not on the city's side.
So the definition section you were looking for is 24-453.
One of the locations on Bermuda, I know that some cities are doing more of these lofty type places where there's work on the base and then
Right.
Work on the base and live on top. So it seems kind of similar to that, only there's detached property. It's not on top of one another, but it's almost like that kind of a situation.
But they were
Yeah.
built that way.
Well, through,
And that's-
through the
I think
chair,
that's the difference, yeah.
upper level residential units are allowed under MX
Right.
two.
So that was
Next
previously
to-
communicated that upper level would be permitted.
But this is separate, that's why I wondered about the
Right.
separate part of it, yeah.
Where is what is the section of the ordinance, if you know, Justin, that prevents the two structures on the property from being viewed together? Why do we have to look at the structure that was built as the former house in isolation from the other structure on the property?
It's not,
That was just how the request was communicated to me, that
right.
the front would be a residential unit, the rear could be someone's garage or workshop or something like that. So that's really where that all came from, as far as the noticing and things like that, if that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, I'm having trouble understanding why a variance is necessary for someone to use this property as a home business and to live in
Well,
the one structure, and if the other structure is being used for business purposes. It seems, I'm looking in the ordinances and I'm not seeing anything that addresses this issue that states each building or each structure in isolation on a parcel of property needs to be evaluated in a vacuum to determine whether there is compliance with the zoning district for the entire parcel.
Through the
I
chair,
don't,
can I ask a quick question? Are there totally separate utilities? Or is the water one, maybe? I'm just,
No, the water is.
separate?
No, there's one electric, one gas, and one,
For the house and the building?
yes.
See, that's where I think it causes a problem too, because now they're not separate. That's the point of what I was trying to get at. I was trying to figure out if they're together or separate, so.
right. I don't think that the variance request has to include home business. If there's a way that can work within the single building, I think that's the interpretation that we were working off of, is that the front home would be a residence. And so that's where the prohibition came into play that I mentioned earlier, but.
Yeah, that's what I'm not understanding though, because it's a home business is a permitted use. A home business would not be a
Right.
non-conforming use.
Right.
So if someone wanted to use this parcel as a home business in MXD2, I don't see how there could be a need for a variance when it's a permitted use.
So they could use the house, no matter what, as a home, and use the back portion for
So long as there were a business that was being conducted out of the parcel.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a need for a variance for a home business in that regard, but.
So if we're working, if the applicant is here under the impression that this is a property that requires a variance in order for someone to live in the house while operating a studio or a, law office or something like that, off of the property, I'm not seeing why a variance is necessary for that.
No, I agree. I totally agree. What was communicated to me in the application, and we talked about a number of options, was that that they wanted to sell this property as single-family residential only, not home business. If it's gonna be a home business, that's different.
It's a non-issue
I agree.
then.
Yeah, it's not an issue.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so I totally agree.
So I just want to make sure that they were communicated that.
Yes.
The reason
Okay.
I say that is because I think anyone purchasing a business there would appreciate having maybe a home business, so to speak.
There's a
But-
few on the block.
I guess there's a combination for saleability too. It's a really large structure at the back. It's not for everybody, is what I'm gonna say to you. So, and if the house isn't conducive for living, even though you're saying it has a front room and a bathroom and a kitchen, a true bedroom is gonna be important and all that, so, because it can't be a house without a bedroom. So, those are the kind of things I guess I wanna think about as far as what that structure is, and now that we know it's all one utility, it's really one place.
There's a shower, there's a nice tile shower in the gym and a bathroom.
No, we're talking about the house,
But
sorry.
the house is, there's a traditional kitchen in there, it's small, but it's nice. It just doesn't have a shower in it.
So it only has a toilet and a sink?
It has a kitchen and then a toilet and a sink. Now,
Well,
to
it's
put
not
one-
really a house.
To put
Sorry.
one of these, to put one of these small little showers in there, the house is only 1,000 square feet. So I mean, to put one in is not gonna be a huge issue, I wouldn't think, because we were actually.
No, it's a big bathroom.
It's a good sized bathroom in there.
Right, but ideally a house has to have a three-piece bathroom.
Yeah, for
Okay.
saleability purposes,
No, a
there's
house.
shower.
If we want to consider it as a home office, ideally the house has to have that, being that the commercial part being at the back, or the office at the back. A home business, I don't think you would do the business out of the home as much as you would use the structure at the back, because it just makes sense, that's all.
Okay, so I just want to clarify here then, what the variance is really asking, despite the language in the variance request suggesting that perhaps it could be sold to someone that would use it as for a business purpose, what the variance is asking for is for the ability to sell it only as a residential property without any business use whatsoever.
That's the way it was communicated to me.
So they wanted to change it from
Yeah.
to just a strictly residential?
Let's, hold on just a minute.
that's questionable.
So-
Let's have the applicant's realtor speak for a moment. I'm not sure this is gonna.
I'm confused.
Yeah, my interpretation of variance was a little different.
I hope it's okay if I use my notes, but my name is Leonard Besnos. I'm with Berkshire Hathaway in Birmingham. I'm also friends with the Rays. And I've reviewed the ordinance, I've reviewed the literature pertaining to non-conforming use, and I was also the person who prepared the application. I think the property is unique, and I think the city is unique. As you drive down Woodward or Livernois, you see a wide array of uses. I think that this property can be viewed, even if you were to use the house exclusively as a residence and the other building as a shop or an artist studio or whatever. There's numerous permitted uses, maybe 30 or 40 different uses, that it would still conform to the intent or the objective of having variety on the street. There's some concerns that have to be satisfied pertaining to how this use variance would affect the code adversely. And I've gone through them a number of times, and I don't think it will. I think the property as it stands is quite unique. The house is 90 years old. It does still have a kitchen. In fact, I think originally there were 3 bedrooms there. There's 3 rooms that have built-in dressers. So I think it was a three-bedroom, full kitchen and bath, and then a fairly large living area. I did make some notes, and I'd like to review those if I could. Our wish is that the property continue to be mixed use, with having a residence in the front and another use in the rear. That's not to say that it could not be used as a residence and a home office and another use in conjunction to the outlying building. Excuse me, I'm going to grab my glasses.
This is all MXD2. So if they sell those almost up here to turn into home business, that's not right.
I mean, it already can be used as a home business. What they want is they want to do. I mean, it's actual no business.
One of the, I should point out that parties who've been interested in the house have almost exclusively been interested in residing in the house and using the ancillary building for a workshop, studio, light manufacturing, et cetera. So that was basically one of the reasons that we thought it might be worth pursuing this request.
Let me stop you for just a minute. Based on the discussion that we just had, that's a permitted use. Living in the house and running a studio out of the back building is a permitted use. There's no need for a variance for that. What the variance what this variance request is asking us to do is to say that the property can be used only for someone to live in the house with no business use of any kind, not even someone who is doing private dance lessons in a studio in the back or anything like that, only a residence. And that's the thing that we're struggling with up here, because when it comes to granting a use variance, the question isn't whether we can demonstrate as a city that the proposed use would be problematic compared to the surrounding neighborhood. The applicant has to demonstrate that an unnecessary hardship exists that would stand in the way of carrying out the strict letter of the ordinance. So we have been up here discussing the fact that that we believe it still could be used as a home business because there's language in the variance request that suggests that that's what the applicant wants and is concerned about. And then when Rossano came up and spoke, he mentioned that he would have preferred to live in the building while he ran his business in the back. As I sit here today, I can't see any reason why he wasn't permitted to do that. That seems clearly permitted under the ordinance, and that probably should have been challenged at the time. And we think that's actually permitted now, but there's no need for a variance for that.
I'm not sure it was in 2004 when they bought it.
Okay, so it
I'm
may
not
have been
sure.
different
I'm
at
not
that
sure.
time.
Yeah.
But
There
right
have been
now,
some updates.
Yeah.
a home business or a home is clearly a permitted use. Having a art, craft, music, or dance studio is clearly a permitted use.
Yeah.
I guess I'm having a hard time understanding why you need a use variance.
Well, we felt there was some ambiguity in the code as it was written. And in talking to Justin a number of times this year, I believe he was of the opinion that it could not be reverted to residential use whatsoever. We talked about this at length, so he did say that it was uncommon for this to occur, but we decided that we would come before the zoning board and see how you were disposed.
No, I mean, I think based on what I'm hearing from my fellow board members, our collective opinion is that operating a home business on the site is a permitted use that does not require a variance. And if that means someone is living in that space in the front and operating a, pottery studio in the back, that is permitted. It's a permitted use. It doesn't matter whether that wasn't a dwelling at the time the ordinance changed, because it's not going to be turned back into a residence. It's going to be used as a permitted use as a home business.
Like I said, I mean, I welcome hearing that, but we felt there was some ambiguity in the code as it was written, and we were unsure that that was the case, so that's why we filed the application.
And I appreciate that, and I guess what I'm saying to you is, grading the variance as posed is a much bigger hurdle to you, because you would have to convince us that we should give you a variance that allows you to have just one person living in the entire parcel as a residence with no other attached use. That's what the variance is asking for.
Right.
And in order for you to convince us that that's appropriate, you need to convince us that there's an unnecessary hardship, which includes, for example, demonstrating that their property could not be put to a reasonable use for the purpose permitted in the zoning district.
Which it does.
And here I think that's going to be very difficult for you to achieve.
Through the chair, I have another clarifying question. The more we talk, the more confused I'm getting about like what actually the applicant wants. And so I'm just curious, is part of the issue with the home business in the ordinance that relying on that in order for someone to live in the house then limits the types of businesses that can go on in the ancillary structure?
To a certain extent, if you look at the ordinance, it would allow fine art studios, home offices for a lawyer, CPA, consultant, and architect.
Even what it
and
currently
anything
is
like
used
that.
for.
Current use, that's again, I don't understand, under the current zoning ordinance, excuse me, if Rosano had set up his business and proposed to live in the front building, I don't see how that would, I don't
Through the
possibly see
chair.
how that would not be a permitted use.
When we bought it, we were told that he couldn't live there.
And it
Who
might
were you
have
told
been-
that by?
In 2002?
2004, I just looked it up.
Okay, it's, Board Member Palmer has mentioned it may have been, the ordinance may have been different then, but the ordinance as it exists right now, as a permitted use, allows a home business.
The mixed-use zoning didn't exist at all before 2010.
No, it
So,
didn't.
Okay.
it may not have been permitted at the time.
So it may have been like light industrial or something back at that point.
Right, yeah, considering
Okay.
everything else that was around it. that
That's what I was
wouldn't
just going to
surprise
say.
me.
what-
Yeah,
what
I
it had
suspect that's
around it,
exactly the
yeah.
issue.
I have a
Let's
question.
get to Board Member Colson. He's been patient down here. Yeah. All right.
As I was reading through the applicant's application, it seems, if I may ask, the intent for the request of the variance is so that you have a better opportunity of selling the property to, you said you've had multiple people look at the property, yet they want to use it as residential and single-family home. Is that the intent of your variance request, to provide that to the buyer?
Well, that's certainly been an issue that's been raised by prospective buyers. We have not made any representation to them as to whether it can be used that way or not.
May I ask how long the property's been on the market?
Late May, early June.
Okay. Have you had anybody come to you who would be using the back part as business and the front part as residence?
We had showings this summer and early fall, and traffic has slowed down,
Okay.
so.
I think I know where you're going, so I guess I have a question. So the potential buyers are asking that they use it as a home and then also a business, and that's already permitted, so it's really up to a buyer to do their due diligence and go to the city and find out what they can and can't do?
Right, because obviously the house would have to be, plans would have to be drafted, would have to go before the building department for the modification of the bathroom. But there were 3 bedrooms there. There is a full kitchen and a partial bath. So the only thing that's really lacking is a shower.
but because it can be used as a home office, as we've stated before, or home business, I'm sorry, that house could be, you can do anything to that house. I mean, sure, you'll have to get permits for the things that need permitted, but I'm just saying, it's already there.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you,
Yeah.
Board Member Palmer. I mean, and I appreciate that there's been some confusion based on what was maybe the previous regime, that this was probably an industrial district before. I don't know this for a fact, but based on the surrounding area, I suspect it was probably zoned industrial or light industrial at the time. That's changed in 2010. Now it's mixed use. Now there is, as a matter of right, if someone wants to operate a home business on the site, which means, you know, you are living there, if it's a home business, and you have a lot of variety in what you can do for that home business. You could have someone living there who is giving guitar lessons in the back building as their studio and living in the front building. And if the building department refused to approve, say they wanted to make some changes, Justin, and the building department said, you can't make these changes because you're not allowed to do that in this district, would that then come before us, since we are charged with interpreting the zoning ordinance and zoning map?
If the building department said this use is not permitted in that.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so then we would have the opportunity to weigh in on that and make the determination. And we're making a determination, you know, informally now as a body, that we do not believe that that is that operating a business as a home business on this parcel is something that requires a variance because it's permitted.
Can we actually, I mean,
Sentiment?
not so much a motion, but can we, maybe just provide a statement of the board's views, basically officially making this, that this is our view as a board, so they can skip that whole step of like coming back, basically?
Well, there's no coming back if it's used the proper way, but
Well,
it's a
right, but I'm
potential
saying-
use right now. It's a potential use until there's a buyer.
Yeah.
Right now, it's the current use.
Well, what I'm saying is, so someone buys it, they go to the city says, oh, no, you can't do that.
I don't believe we can do
then
that
have to come back.
prophylactically.
I would hope that Justin would have that conversation with the building department and say, you know, we've already had this conversation
Okay.
about this property.
And a buyer's
And
not
we
gonna
wouldn't be
buy,
brought back here for that.
and I'm sure a buyer will not buy without doing their due diligence at the city also. So it's highly unlikely that a business is gonna be denied, a home business, be denied, unless they're building atomic bombs, okay? I mean, but I'm just saying, the regular everyday stuff is gonna be permitted, and do home businesses have to have a permit?
So they fill out a zoning determination request form, which goes to me. So there shouldn't be any confusion on the home business part.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. But home businesses, a lot, I mean, I think in this instance, there may be a certificate of occupancy, but a lot of times when it's just someone who lives in an R1 district that, tutors once a week, there's not really a C of O that goes with
But
that.
R1 is not the mixed use, so it's a totally different.
Different scenario, yes,
Right.
yes.
But you can still have a pretty low intensive use and have it be a home business based on what the examples are in the ordinance.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
pottery studio,
Yeah.
a portrait studio.
Yeah.
To the applicant, has this discussion clarified some things for you about what can be done currently on the property?
Yes, it has.
Basically, we didn't need to be here tonight.
That's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like. And I wanted to ask you, do you want to proceed with your variance request in light of what you're hearing? Or is this, or do you now feel that you have the flexibility that you need to tell prospective buyers what can and can't be done with the property?
I think we're good. I mean, that was my thing. Obviously, there was some kind of miscommunication somewhere.
I think the law changed for Sano when you were already there, and that's just what happened. You probably could have after 2010, if you had wanted to move onto the property, you probably could have done it without any trouble. But at the time before then, it would have been different.
He said no way, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
I want to ask you on a record, at this point, do you want to withdraw your variance request at this point? Okay, well, we appreciate you coming before us. I hope we were able to help, and if any more issues come up, we're the board that is charged with interpreting the ordinance. So if there's another concern with someone who says, I want to buy the property and I don't want, someone's not letting me live there, it sounds like that will come back before us, and we'll be the ones who will be
No, they
interpreting
need
the
to-
ordinance in that respect. ultimately.
No,
Judy.
it's not gonna come before us. If they go before, they have to go to the building department before they purchase the property.
They gotta go
It's
to Justin.
smart.
Well, yeah, I mean, I am talking,
I know. It's probably never gonna happen, so it's okay.
all right, thank you very much.
But really, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Oh, really?
so with that, we'll conclude the public hearing and discussion on 561 Livernois. It looks like we still are not going to have a use variance before us after all. And we'll move on to the next public hearing, which is 1461 East 8 Mile Road. This is a window sign variance request by Motor City Pawnbrokers. You want to introduce this to us, Justin?
Sure, I can briefly introduce it. The applicant, Mark Aubrey, is here on behalf of Motor City Pawnbrokers. They are proposing some window signage, vinyl decals that would cover up some windows at 1461 East 8 Mile. Our current sign ordinance requires that window signs be no larger than 20% of the glass surface. That's been interpreted as, within one window pane, also an entirety if you have a larger display window. So, as you probably noticed around town, there's different people who interpret that differently. So the applicant's proposal, he also has another visual aid that he brought as well in case you need to see it, of what he's intending for. Some of the issues raised in the application were visibility, where the building is located on site, on 8 Mile, adjacent to the railroad tracks, and having some visibility issues just with the location. But here to answer any questions you might have. The criteria for the sign regulations is in your packet on the second page of that staff report.
All right, thank you, Justin. Acting as a sign board of appeals, this board may hear requests for variances from the regulations. These variances are granted in cases involving practical difficulties or unique conditions regarding the sign or its location, and the burden of proof lies with the applicant. Variances may be granted under our ordinance for any of the following conditions. First, the applicant has demonstrated a variance is needed due to a practical difficulty on the site, such as varied topography, horizontal or vertical road curvature, or presence of structures or desired trees that limits visibility of the sign on the premises. Second, a variance is warranted due to the relatively large size of the site, frontage, or building. Or third, a variance would significantly improve the conformity of an existing sign. Let's hear from the applicant. Would you like to speak about your request? You could just step up to the microphone, state your name, introduce yourself, and then tell us.
Good evening, Mark Aubrey, Motor City Pawn. I just would like to say I feel like you guys were itching to approve an applicant tonight. Just so happens the last ones didn't need to be here, so let's keep up those good vibes. Owner of Motor City Pawn. I've been here before. I'm not sure if it's the same board or not. I think you look familiar.
Yeah.
All of you. Okay, good.
Yes.
That's good. So I've been open for, a year and a half, 2 years now at this location. No problems. I've renovated, remodeled as much as I possibly could. I think I did a good job. I know you mentioned it has to be a unique situation for something like this. It's sort of on a service drive that veers to the right. It's extremely difficult to see the building. I get at least, 5 to 10 customers a day, Mike, that say they can't. At least 10 customers a day that say they can't find this building. Well, they obviously found it, but it took them a few days sometimes in some cases. Yeah, some don't even show. So this, what you see here, these window decals is actually a tint. You can't see them from the inside of the building, only the outside. When you're looking outside from the in, it just looks like a normal window. Something I did at all of my other locations, just so happens those communities don't have a sign ordinance, window sign ordinance at least. So I personally, just speaking honestly, I feel that it gives it a professional look. If you've seen the building now, what is there now is white bars, which is a typical perception of a pawn shop, bars in the windows, that type of thing. So I'm trying to get away from that, old school perception of what people perceive as a typical pawn shop. If you walked inside, you will know it's not that typical pawn shop. It's, well lit. I try to make them look like a Best Buy as much as possible. The outside of the building, I did as much as I could, I think, to change that appeal. These, personally, I think it's a nice professional look. It looks a little brighter in this picture here. They're not really that bright because it's a tint. They're a little dim. The pictures are a little dim. I don't like that gaudy, bright look anyway, so it is a professional look to me. I think, personally, I think it's better than having bars in the windows. That's why I'm here. Now, I don't know if you remember, I had windows on 3 sides of this building. I blocked them up for safety concerns, so if you could just pretend that those windows are still there, we'd be at around 20% anyway, so. But unfortunately, I have to come because now the windows are just in the front. But personally, I feel the unique situation, it is a little bit of a hardship to see this building. I was here a year and a half ago for a larger sign. You denied it. I think it was a close vote. Let's not forget that. And I did listen to you guys. I put a 40 square foot sign on this huge 120 square foot frontage of a building, which was another part of the hardship I think Mr. Williams said. So it's got to be a large building, which it is. I just think it would help customers find the building. It is a nice professional look. You see it at some high-end jewelry stores, like Lucido's, Ahi, stuff like that. They have these same decals on their windows. So I was trying to do the same. Just to bring up the image of that old school pawn shop perception, I think it would help. Any questions?
Mark, first, welcome back. We're glad to still have you in the community. I think you guys do a good job over there. You've really cleaned up the site.
Thank you.
It looks much nicer than it did before you were relocated from your tiny previous building. Do you have any idea when the Kitchen Concepts is actually going to build their building on your old lot?
Yeah, I spoke with them. Actually, I saw them in the city when I was applying for this upstairs, and they said they're having issues with plumbing. Sewers. I think you guys are making them put sewers underground, new sewers, so he's upset a little bit. Luckily, he paid me cash, and we closed a long time ago, so I don't got to deal with that. But it's his problem now. But that's his issue.
We have a nice-looking building proposed for the site that's come before Planning Commission like 2 years ago now, and I still have not seen a speck of work on it. I hope that it goes somewhere. We have, as you know, granting a sign variance is something that we can't just do just because we're being nice. Obviously, we weren't able to do it for you before. We have specific legal requirements that we have to meet. Some of those being that first, that the inability to conform with the regulations is due to a practical difficulty or unique condition that includes more than mere inconvenience or mere inability to attain a supposed higher financial return. We also have to be comfortable that the alleged practical difficulties or unique condition, or both, are exceptional and peculiar to the property of the person requesting the variance and result from conditions which do not exist generally throughout the city. The variance has to result in substantial justice being done, considering the public benefits intended to be secured by the regulations, the individual practical difficulties that will be suffered by a failure to grant a variance, and the rights of others whose property would be affected if by the allowance of the variance, and will not be contrary to the public purpose and general intent of these regulations. We have to be comfortable that the variance granted is the minimum necessary to allow the applicant to have a reasonable outlet for free speech and meet the intent of these sign regulations, and that the variance will not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. So we're probably going to want to hear from you on each one of these different conditions, because these are all conditions that, for us to consider granting a variance of any size, whether the significant variance that you've requested or anything else, we'd have to be satisfied with all of these.
Okay, let's go over them one by one. I'll do my best.
Let's first talk about, for commission or board members, if you guys have the ability to take some notes on this, let's run through each one of these conditions with the applicant and see what his reasoning is, and then let's take some questions on these. Or you know what? Let me put it to you as a board. Will it be more difficult to keep those questions in mind if we do it that way, or would you prefer to do questions on each condition after we talk about that specific condition?
Well,
That might make more
he doesn't
sense.
have to meet all those conditions.
Yeah, just one.
He just has to meet one.
I think
Actually,
I
he
meant
does have
one.
to meet all the conditions.
All of them?
Yes, to grant a variance for one of the conditions specified above, which would be the 3 that I did initially, all of the following standards must be met.
Okay, I remember the one. Okay,
Yes.
gotcha.
So
Okay.
for him to show us that the variance is needed due to a practical difficulty on the site, he's got to convince us of all of these things that I just read.
Gotcha.
Or for him to convince us, which it sounds like he's probably going to be focusing on, is going to be the relatively large size of the site, the frontage of the building. It is a larger building. We would be thinking of these 5 conditions that I just read in the context of a large building.
Or where it sits on 8 Mile,
Right.
the way it's unique.
I think C is pretty much out of the question, which is a variance would significantly improve the conformity of an existing sign. That's not an issue here. So we're really looking at whether a variance is needed due to varied topography, horizontal or vertical road curvature, or else we're looking at a variance being warranted due to the relatively large size of the site, frontage, or building.
I agree.
I have a question of Justin. Is this property zoned differently than the other properties around it, and why?
Yes. This site was a conditional rezoning. It's zoned C3, extended business, I believe. And then to the east, it's all zoned OS. And then to the west, there is, on the end of this little service drive area where there was a self-storage facility proposed, maybe it's still in progress, they need to check in with me real soon. Was rezoned also, conditional rezoning also for M1 industrial, so.
So this particular property is already zoned differently than the other properties around it?
Right, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
just want that clarification. So we're already dealing with a different property.
Unique. So it is unique. Commercial.
All right, any other questions of staff before we talk about the different conditions? All right, hearing none, let's talk about, why don't you let us know, Mark, first, are you asking for a variance based on the size of the building, or is it a combination of the size and the varied topography with 8 Mile Road dipping down there?
You mean as far as a hardship? I'm asking for the variance because you had a 20% maximum on window decals. So did you want me to go over each one?
Yeah, that one's not really going to qualify as a hardship. We can grant a variance for based on a couple of different conditions. One of the conditions is that if you demonstrate to us that a variance is needed due to a practical difficulty on the site, such as varied topography, horizontal or vertical road curvature, or presence of a structure that limits visibility, that's not going to be an issue with yours, but you do have a potential issue of varied topography.
And road curvature, because it veers off to the right where it's extremely difficult to see.
And then you also have the issue of a large building with significant frontage.
Right.
So that's what I want to clarify from you. You're asking for the variance based on these multiple factors, the fact that it's a large building and that the road is dipping down there and there's varied topography.
Right, correct.
Okay. So to grant a variance for either one of those conditions, we have to meet the standards that I read a minute ago, and we can get back into these now. The first being the inability to conform with the regulations is due to a practical difficulty or unique condition that includes more than mere inconvenience or mere inability to attain a supposed higher financial return.
My answer to that would be safety concerns. Numerous times a day when I'm there, you see cars veering from the all the way left lane, all the way into the right, just try to get into the parking lot. And I think that's due to the inability to visibly see or know that it is the pawn shop. I feel like these signs would definitely help that. Even not just, I mean, it would help in the immediate timing of them pulling in, but it would also help as far as planting a seed of customer driving by, oh, there's Motor City Pawn. Next time they know exactly where it is. It's extremely difficult to see because of that curved road / service drive, whatever you want to call it. Also, the sign is pretty small, and it's near impossible to see that Motor City Pawn sign if you are driving from east to west. There's not a problem when you're driving west to east because the building's sort of facing the driver's going west to east. East to west is that's the hardship. Safety concerns would be definitely for Part A condition. It's a safety concern. I think by granting this, it might actually help the drivers and improve safety on 8 Mile Road, to be honest with you.
All right, anything else you want to raise on that, on that issue? Inability to conform is due to a practical difficulty or unique condition that includes more than a mere inconvenience or inability to attain a higher financial return?
Yeah, I mean, I think safety is, it's not just an inconvenience or, I mean, it's not about a higher financial return. I think that would be a serious concern.
Okay, so safety is the issue for that factor. Let's talk about, before we move on, actually, let's see if any of the board members have questions about this one in particular.
Justin, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
So the 20% I know is on most commercial property, but what's the difference between C3 and, let's say, the Woodward properties? They're the same? Same. Okay, gotcha.
Same sign
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that they're, because they're amongst other stuff, I didn't know if there might have been a difference. Okay.
I'm just curious for clarification. Is it 20% of each window, or can you total the square footage of all the windows and like maybe 1 out of every 5 is completely covered, but the other 4 are not covered at all?
Justin, you want to speak to that?
We've interpreted it both ways. It really, we've done it both ways.
Okay.
So in other
It's
words,
pretty gray in the ordinance.
so Justin, what you're saying is it could be interpreted that if you took the if you took the total volume of the windows as a whole and then cut 20% off of that, they could potentially put a couple of those up in windows and be within the 20% as long, but just not be having every single one of the windows covered with one of these decals.
Correct.
All right, thank
So
you.
every other one or something.
Is that per face, like building face, or would that be,
Yes, per building.
so he can't like use the square footage of the side windows? Okay.
Oh, sorry, I was wrong on that then.
Through the chair.
Sure.
This question can be for either the applicant or Justin, whoever is more familiar with this type of sign. You mentioned specifically that they're very professional and that from the inside looking out, it's like a regular window, but from the outside looking in, you see the advertisement. Is that, and so I want to hear from both of you, is that typical of window signage? Is that atypical? Are window signs usually more opaque from the inside?
We've seen both here. I would say that it's not typical of what I've seen. Most of the window signage I've seen is opaque, and that you can't really see through, at least what I've seen in the city, but I can't speak for the region or what's normal for sign companies, but normally it is all opaque from what, it's the typical sign in Ferndale.
They're poster-like.
Right,
Yeah.
From the inside looking out, they cannot see the street?
Correct.
right.
Okay. And in this case, they would be able to see the street?
That's my understanding. I think that the opaque version is more affordable, is what it seems like based on the amount I see in Ferndale.
The skin, basically, yeah.
Right, he answered that correctly. It's a newer type of,
Application.
yeah, it's new. It is a little bit more pricier, but I feel that's professional. And I understand the intent of your ordinance. You don't want those gaudy, hot pink, hot yellow type signs with all these words, but, you know, I'm not that type of business owner. I like the professional look. I think this is, I just think it's a better look for the facade rather than having those bars. Obviously, it's, you know, we have to go over each one of these conditions, but there is also a hardship as far as location, size, safety concerns with many other type of hardships for this particular building.
Through the chair. Justin, how much over the 20% is he using this signage? I mean, there's 100% being used, don't get me wrong.
Right, so that's the way we
Yeah,
calculated it.
okay,
Yeah,
so he has to take out 80%
right. That's what,
to be in conforming to our codes, okay.
correct.
So it would be maybe every third one he would be allowed to use.
Every
Okay.
fifth.
I mean, there's 10. So that's why I said every third one, so there'd be able to be 3 rather than 10. 12, sorry, there's 12. So you'd be able to use 4.
Let's talk about alleged practical difficulties or unique condition, or the next a condition here, which is that the alleged practical difficulties or unique condition are exceptional and peculiar to the property of the person requesting the variance and result from conditions which do not exist generally throughout the city. Can you speak to that for us, Mark?
I think that goes back to the road curvature. I don't know of any property on, or commercial property zone C3, C2, C1 that actually has that, other than this site, to be honest with you. I mean, Ferndale's pretty small. I've drove around Woodward and other roads where you have commercial zoning. I've never seen, I mean, I think all of them have pretty good frontage, and you can see it easily. This is unique because of that service drive type of road curvature. So I think that plays a role with item B there.
Board members, any specific questions on that issue? All right, let's move on to the next requirement, which is that allowing the variance will result in substantial justice being done, considering the public benefits intended to be secured by the regulations, the individual practical difficulties that will be suffered by a failure to grant a variance, and the rights of others whose property would be affected by the allowance of the variance and will not be contrary to the public purpose and general intent of these regulations.
I think the property owners adjacent would be happy, rather than having bars in the window. I think practical difficulties that will be suffered by failure if you don't grant it. Again, I would go back to safety issue. I mean, I see it all the time, and I'm actually being honest. These people swerve to get in, and sometimes they don't even pull in through the driveway. They'll pull over the curb. Happens all the time. That's why part of the curb is missing. If you going more east to the beginning of that service drive, part of the curb's missing because of that reason. They miss and they just go over the curb. So safety is huge. I think that also plays a role. So two parts to that. I don't think it would affect the surrounding properties or neighbors. Matter of fact, I think they'd be happy about it. As far as failure, if you don't grant, I think that safety issue comes into play.
Clarification through the chair. Sure. You keep mentioning the bars, and from what I can tell, the bars are on the inside, correct?
Right.
Okay, so really you're not taking away the bars, you're just using these images to cover up the view of the bars.
Right. You won't see the bars if they're on there.
Okay.
The bars they're there. You could obviously see them from the road, but I was paying attention today actually because I knew it was coming here tonight. You definitely could see the bars from the road. You won't be able to see them with these covering the window, basically.
Through the chair, you've also mentioned the safety issue about that area where it curves, and then also the median in the middle there, and not being able to turn if you're going eastbound,
East to
right?
west.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What alternatives have you attempted to use to identify your business more?
I've tried to use one of those flying blow-up guys.
Okay.
But you also have an ordinance that I can't have that, so I received a letter to take that down. There's really not much you can do. I tried a sign holder. You also have an ordinance that prohibits sign holders, which the other communities I'm in does not have an ordinance prohibiting that. So there's not much I could do.
What's a sign holder?
Just somebody out there holding a sign.
Okay.
Yeah, I also got a letter about that too. So.
Okay.
I'm sorry, through the chair. Justin, he's allowed to have a sandwich board. There'd be no reason why he couldn't put a sandwich board between the sidewalk and on the grassy area between the sidewalk and the
Street.
The parking, not the street.
Oh, that's right,
The
sidewalk.
parking lot,
Yeah.
you know. But there's a limitation in how big that sideboard is. It's,
3 feet tall, I think.
yeah.
That is MDOT property where that grass is. My property starts at as a matter of fact, the parking lot is MDOT property. I had to get special approval to put new concrete there through
you kidding
MDOT.
me?
No, I'm serious. That whole driveway going all the way through it's all
It used
MDOT
to be
owned.
8 Mile Road, that's why.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't even own that. I mean, I redid the concrete and spend $100,000 on new concrete, but I don't own it.
I'd put a sign there.
I would have had MDOT.
Yeah,
But,
so.
You ever,
so Justin, would he have to have MDOT approve a sandwich sign?
I mean, probably, technically, sure. I don't know if they're checking on that.
Yeah, how many people are from?
Yeah, I don't
driving
think that
around?
you'll have to worry about that, but a sandwich sign can help, because it'll be your east-west traffic.
yeah, does MDOT
I was
even,
thinking that same thing, so, thank
does
you.
MDOT even fall under Ferndale ordinances? or are
MDOT
they
is
their
above
own
and
thing?
beyond.
That's what I figured, so.
Yeah, we can't do anything in the median
That's
on
called the
Woodward because
state.
of MDOT.
The
I have
state trumps us. Oh, I shouldn't
Really
use that
naive
word.
question, but have
State.
you ever, was it ever considered to have your address on Bennett? So people could maybe find it easier as opposed to 8 Mile, which is,
It's a serious problem. We have customers that park in the back of our building, get out and look around. We see them on the camera. Where is this place? And they just drive off because Google Maps will take them to the
the
rear
back, yeah.
for some reason, and I can't figure it out.
It's something about the, when we originally had purchased the property, it was two different,
Addresses?
addresses. And when we merged them, Google flipped out and decided that it was in the back of the building. So currently, we have a huge issue with that when people drive to the back of the building.
Yeah.
There's nothing back there, there's no way to get in, and there would be no way to get to the back there. That's our storage area, which is always totally secure.
you can actually edit the pinpoint on Google Maps.
Yeah,
I
you
would
can.
recommend,
And we also got a Google locator, so it's actually a little piece of plastic with a GPS locator in it, and we put it in the front of the building underneath our, we have roll-down gates.
Yeah.
So we put it underneath our roll-down gates right in the front. So,
Yeah, there's still an issue. I did change that drop pin on, I don't understand it. It's a weird, set of 5 buildings that,
Don't try to call Google, you won't get anywhere, so.
Put it on the guardrail in the middle of 8 Mile.
On the roof, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, well, at one point, this is the manager, he was so frustrated, he was, streaking with obviously pants on just to get customers in.
Streaking. I have a clown suit.
We'll let you guys do anything here.
But you guys, you could put a sign on the back of the building that says entrance on 8 Mile, but then you'd have to come to the sign ordinance and get approval of that.
Yeah. We're already at the maximum, Greg, so that would be difficult.
No, they can say enter it on 8 Mile.
Joking.
yeah, and it's per face, so you can have another side on the back, right?
Right.
Separate face.
Okay, so did I answer adequately A, B, and C? I hope I did, so,
Let's talk about D, which is, D is that the variance granted is the minimum necessary to allow the applicant to have a reasonable outlet for free speech and meet the intent of these sign regulations.
I think that's debatable. I mean, minimum necessary. To me, it could be 100%, you could be 99. That's debatable. I don't know, that's a trick question to me. The variance granted is minimum necessary to allow the applicant to have reasonable outlet of free speech to meet the intent of the sign regulation. I mean, would 20% solve the problems in A, B, and C? I personally don't think so. It still would be difficult to notice. They might not notice 1 or 2 windows. 50% every other. Personally, I think 100% will just look a ton more professional than a hodgepodge every other. And it would definitely solve the safety concerns, people noticing the building, pulling in the right area. I think 100% would do the trick. We would be 100% certain that it would solve A, B, and C problems. So if that answers D, that's what I'm going to go with.
Questions from board members?
Comments, but not questions.
Well, I'll open up for discussion among board members in a moment after we get through these. The last one we have here is that the variance will not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to predict that your response here is going to be that it's going to improve the safety of the public and that it's not going to adversely affect the safety.
You are exactly correct, Mr. Williamson. That's what I was going to say.
All right. Mark, thanks for your detailed answers. I'm going to open this up now for discussion with the board. I imagine we'll probably have a couple more questions we'll come up with, but you can have a seat if you like.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Call you back up. All right. Discussion among the board.
Actually, I do have a question for Justin before I get into conversation or discussion. Is there any description of why the ordinance is written the way it is? 20% as opposed to 30 or 40%?
It doesn't specifically call out that explanation for window signage. There's a lot of intent description for the overall signed ordinance that, talks about the intent is to regulate location, manner of display, minimize visual clutter to protect the health, safety, and welfare. There's a lot of objective statements that talk about the minimum number of regulations and illumination and reducing visual pollution and preventing signs that are dangerous to the public and things like that, but not really anything specific to that 20% figure. I think probably a lot of it was in response to things I think that were happening in downtown where people had complete windows filled up and you couldn't see people, in businesses, and it, kind of takes away from the vibrancy of things downtown.
Yeah.
I don't know that applies here, but I think that was probably a lot of the intent. And I think that there are some sign ordinances that do focus on zoning districts, I think you were getting at earlier, which we've talked about and looked at and maybe where we're going in the future, but this, I think they just chose to have a blanket window sign just for consistency.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
wasn't
because
here-
I do
wasn't
know
here
that we
in
had that
2009.
conversation of having something different on Woodward and 8 Mile than we did throughout the rest of the city.
Right.
Because of the fact that they are higher traffic roads, wider roads, harder to see. But in this case, even with windows, I think that was more toward business signs as opposed to window coverings.
Here we go.
And my understanding as we've dealt with this through the year is sometimes window coverings can come across as being, blocking the view into the business, and almost making the building feel, warehouse-like and closed up, Fort Knox, don't want anything to be seen in. And I don't think that's the intention of this, the applicant. I understand why you're doing this and what you're trying to achieve. I guess my concern would be the severity of 100%. In my mind, I kind of have an issue with the 2-door areas. Just because in your image, you show almost everything covered except for the doors themselves. And I guess I kind of have issue with, the windows on sides of the doors of just being, again, kind of making that feel a bit warehousey and closed off. I actually don't have any issue with the individual windows being covered up. It's just, I think 100% was just, for me, is a bit severe.
Speak to that point, sorry. I would be okay with taking off the details around the door, those two.
The two doorways?
They actually do that wrong, that's wrong.
The second one's wrong.
It's not supposed to be fully covered.
Correct.
But I don't mind taking out the details around the doors and just do
If you look
Yeah,
at
this
the
is
one-
old.
Just doing the windows and then the one long window?
Just do it through Google Maps. The Google Earth version is too old.
Yeah, I just think it wouldn't make it look like you're trying to completely close yourself off. I understand from the inside, it's still gonna allow a lot of light in, with those decals, with the window clings. But from the outside, it almost appears like you could have put up boards, and just painted something on it, which is not obviously what you're doing, but it just kind of has that feel of just, you're trying to block that view into the business, and I know that's not really your intention.
But how much will that take that down, though?
I don't know.
Yeah, we're still looking at a lot of coverage
You're
there.
still you're probably looking at 80%,
8,
80, maybe 75%.
and then 2, and then not the doors?
Yeah,
So we're down to 8, so we're,
I would agree with that. I can take details around the doors. I think there's a large window next to both, those are 2 doors, they covered in the picture.
Yeah.
So 2 doors obviously would be open, and then there's 2 large windows next to the doors. I can leave those open if you want. And then there's a horizontal above the door.
Yeah, I'm thinking just the 4 on each end of the building, and then between the 2 doors, the 2 long ones.
See how it looks here.
we just have to figure out what percentage that is.
Well, we gotta have a We gotta have,
I'm just offering as a suggestion that I could support.
this is what you could support.
That's something I
Okay.
could support.
To the chair, I could add a comment to what Board Member Polika is saying. I guess for me, I understand the intent of this particular aspect of the sign ordinance to be twofold. Like, one is, to want the community outside the business to be able to see what's going on inside the business, and then the other side, the eyes on the street concept of, especially in an area like this, the more, the people inside are able to look out, and then the more the people outside know that the people inside can look out. So I'm struggling with that because on the one hand, the only reason I even consider like jumping on the bandwagon of supporting any level of variance is because you are specifically stating that these are see-through decals, so that for me would have to be a condition, and that's what makes it different than the other kinds of window signage that you see go on elsewhere in the city. But then that piece about people being able to see what's going on inside is still difficult, and so I think that's why it's really important that, especially at and around the doors, there's nothing so that people can see. And I know that it's not a high trafficked area, foot traffic. I'm just kind of thinking that through.
I can answer that. Sorry. You can only see if you're inside the building. You can definitely see out. You can't even tell that there's anything on the window, because they have it in another store. Right now, currently, as they are, you can't really see people. Those windows are all tinted. They're all existing and left them. You can see the bars because they're painted white, but you can't see any people on the inside already as is. So you can't really see any customers on the inside as is.
And the doors are tinted?
No, the doors you can.
Okay.
But there's usually no traffic. There's no customers in front. They would be shopping area, which is on the right side, or loan area, which is on the left. Basically where the windows are. So just answer. But you definitely can see outside. It's like there's nothing on the windows. It's something I've never seen before. That's why I like it. This particular product. That answers your question.
Through the chair, Justin, does the city see signs on windows differently if they're opaque or not opaque?
No.
And you said that the applicant, you said you are maxed out on your signage?
Yes, I was here a year and a half ago. I think you're only allowed 40 square feet maximum.
Okay.
Whatever the building sign is, that's what I have. Other communities, it's up to 100 to 120. Other communities are not that, but that's what you see is 40.
And you said that the windows are already tinted, you can't see inside?
Right. You can see like bars, but you definitely cannot see customers walking around.
Okay.
For sure.
So your intent is to have these signs to allow it to be more visible to people driving along AMA?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And just if I can add, the only real differentiation is that for window signs, it just states that they need to be placed inside of the building, so you can't apply them outside. I think for weather purposes.
So they don't chip and
Right.
fade, yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So, we have had a variance request in the past, not too distant past, where someone also wanted essentially 100% of the windows to be covered. I know some of you were on the board at this time. Leah, you were on the board, Laura, you were on the board.
I was
Judy.
not. I read that case right before I got on the
Oh,
board.
was that right before you joined us? Yeah, that was a smoothie place.
Yeah.
I think Mike was on the board at that point, newly on the board probably. And for me, 100% coverage that's I think bold to even ask 100% coverage. That's massive. That's everything. That's dispensing with the ordinance essentially. My personal perspective on this is that we do have a sign size limitation, and Motor City Pawnbrokers asked us to increase the size of the sign. We told them no. We kept them within the sign size limitation. They are in a location here that is it's unusual. It's you know, you got a couple of other buildings that are on this same little stub road here. Not many, a couple other ones. They have some paint on the building that that helps make it a little bit more visible, but if someone has never seen a picture of Motor City Pawnbrokers and doesn't know their branded colors of the white and the black and the red, I can understand the expressed concern of safety issues with people driving past the building, missing it, not being able to turn in because of the way they have to come into this little stub road to go into the parking area. It is a large building. There's a pretty decent amount of frontage there as compared to the size of the sign that they were allowed to have, because they joined two buildings together here, essentially, or there were two buildings, or two bays in this building that looks like it was probably at one point two different businesses. Remember, we talked about that at the previous request. 20% coverage would allow them to put a couple of decals up, maybe. It could still be a little bit less noticeable with just a couple of decals up. Concerns about certainly the area around the entrances remaining clear so that there's as much visibility as possible between the main area of the store there and customers coming in and out. I don't like the idea of these doors being covered with decals, or the areas right around the doors being covered by decals. I think personally I could support a variance that would go beyond the 20%, but getting close to 100% is something that when I look at the building, you know, I can see that there could be some need for a little bit more increased visibility, but I'm not convinced that something close to 100% would be necessary to provide that. How about you?
Well, there's 12 signs, and if you take it down to maybe 40%, it's three signs.
Well, 40% would be what, 5 maybe?
I mean, where do we cut that, is what I'm saying is.
Right.
I think, in my opinion, it's a very unique location for a business like this. The road is goofy there.
Look at that.
And I think the size of the building has a lot to do with it. I think that you made valid points. Safety is another thing. It's a big one. But the topographic of the road is goofy. And it is hard to see them, unless you're coming from the east to the west. Even then, it's kind of difficult too. But I don't know that the decals or clings on the windows would make it any better.
Going
from the east
yeah,
from west. From west from east, I agree. I think, sandwich sign would definitely help. If you can throw it out there, it'll help you a lot. Can it be a lighted sandwich sign? Sorry, just thinking. Or is it lighted or lit? I always correct myself on that, but anyway. I think that if you went every other window, so that maximum 4 of them, that would help, and I think the more color in them would be more eye-catchy.
Commissioner Moore, what do you think?
So I travel by you every day, multiple times a day probably, and I know that driveway is it's a strange driveway, and I'm just not sure, because I know kind of how many accidents happen in the city at any one time of day. I'm not sure if it would actually help with the health and safety. I'm not completely convinced. I was on the board when we denied your sign variance for the larger sign, but yeah, no hard feelings. I could see where we could, 40% would roughly be 5 signs. That's a little over 40%, but I would have to decide, that 100% is a pretty bold request as far as signage goes. I always struggle with signage just because it's such a complicated thing and we have so much in our city that signage requests always kind of, it's tougher to wrap my brain around them.
I guess through the chair, excuse me, are you allowed to erect a sign? Okay, I just didn't know.
It's got to be, I mean, a sign can be put
I'm just thinking
out, but
something
here, I
that,
think his issue
was-
is they don't have, it's not their property to put it out there by the roadway.
Right.
And it wouldn't be able to be a real tall one. It would be a shorter one.
Right,
Did
we
we
s-
discuss the last time we were here, multiple driveways? I know that's a completely another issue, but I know getting in there is tough. If you miss it, you have to go down a long ways to turn around. There's no other way you could add another driveway or entrance or,
No, it would be that the property owner, I think the first building on that
okay.
service drive would have.
When people,
Actually, you'd have to go through that as well.
when
well, there's
people
also
pull
a major
into,
power line there.
there, yeah, there is.
Yeah.
People pull in the back, you said typically, a lot of times they'll just leave because they can't find you. Is there anything you guys could do to, is there parking in the back? No.
How do they have to go back past the front of you to get to the back though?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how they get, no, you know what they
No, they stopped the
West-
they
West
stopped
End.
Side
before.
streets, I see,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think they did run it back there, and I think they just pull in off of, John R. Conway, I think.
So they pull in, look around and then leave? They don't ever get out, exit their vehicle, right?
they come around, but
Okay.
a lot of them do.
Through the chair, I have another question for the applicant. With these window decal signs,
Hey,
is,
hold on just a minute.
Yeah.
Leah, would you mind jumping up over to the microphone again? You're getting a lot of questions right now. I want to make sure that we're
Oh.
capturing your answers.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm curious to know with these window decal signs, is it your intention to change them out and vary the content on a regular basis? Or would essentially what you get printed the first time and put up the first time be what stays?
For the most part, it would stay. I don't see myself changing them for years on out, to be honest with you. Unless, I stop taking fur coats and I have a picture of a fur coat, then I would definitely change that out. But that would be the only reason to change, is if, a new item is the new hot item and cell phones are outdated and there's a new gadget that I don't have on there, that would be a good reason to change it out. Or if I don't take that item, that
Or
would be the only reason.
Yeah, or potentially, so if we went with along the lines of the 40%, and so you were allowed fewer, but you had several different things and had more of a need for one item at a given time, you might
Change
swap that out with one of the
It's-
other ones.
These signs are pretty pricey. I would be reluctant to do that.
How long
Are they
did
not reusable? Is that what you're saying?
No, once they take one down,
Oh,
they'd have
okay.
to, it's like a window tint that you would put on your car.
Oh, okay, so you
Similar.
can't, gotcha.
How long are they built
It's not just-
to last?
I
for?
was
Like,
thinking
as far as,
Yeah,
how long
exactly.
do they,
That'd be a great idea.
They gave me a guarantee, I think, 10 to 20 years at my other stores, a pretty long time.
They're color fast.
Yeah,
So-
they're pretty long time.
No
They don't
fading,
fade
no-
in color. No, it's a pretty new, crafty
Yep.
product.
Well, the reason for my line of questioning was because I think another challenge, particular challenge that you face in this area of the city, I don't know if you could go as far as to say particular to this property, but in this row of properties is that it appears to me, I'm not your customer, but I go by every day as well. It appears to me that you are one operating successful business in a row of what appears to be several sort of blighted buildings, like not everything is occupied, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I go by that area and, as I have for the past 6 years,
Not being used.
I often used to wonder whether your store was in existence or not. I wouldn't know just because it was a kind of blighted area. Then when you redid the paint, now I go by and I love the paint. It looks great. It's given me sort of that confidence to know that you guys are definitely actually a business. You're not just like a pawn shop that used to be there. Do you guys know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of arriving to the conclusion that some amount of these decorative window signs, way less than 100%, but maybe more than 20%, and definitely not near the doors, would give a greater indication to the passersby that you guys are, definitely an operable business in this blighted area. and I have to agree with Board Member Palmer that the addition of a sandwich sign would be really helpful, because then that actually shows people when you're open driving by, because you don't have it out there if you're not open. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm driving by wondering if you're open or not. The sandwich board sign is out, I know that you're open. So that's just a thought.
Yes, through the board. I also live near your location, and driving down 8 Mile can be, in that area is a little unique. You kind of have the overpass for 75 right there. You have people coming on the service drive along the overpass. And when you get to that intersection, when you begin the curve, I think some people believe that lane, the far right lane ends, so they begin to come over quickly. So people are kind of, really tense in that area, not paying attention too much. And also when you're coming from west to east, there is the median and you are curving, so you are paying more attention there. I agree with my fellow board member that I think 100% is a little much to ask, but more than 20 to
Like close to
kind of
80,
sting
is
it
that
out.
what you're thinking?
Well, I also thought that the window tint between the windows, or between the doors, may not be appropriate.
You mean the ones that are connecting the two?
The sunglasses.
Oh, sunglasses. Oh. Is that because of the sunglasses? Because that could change the image.
Yeah, I'm not an aviator guy.
What is right there, like as far as in the store, where those?
There you go.
That is basically.
No, I mean, like when you walk in, what's in the store there?
Shades?
Nothing. What is there, Mike?
It's the walkway from the showroom to the,
Right, okay.
the lawn area. There's vending machines there.
It
Right.
appears, when I'm looking at the Google map, that the awning, that the sunglasses would never be seen like that it's a much smaller space. That the awning is
The
there.
awnings end at the tip of the window frames on all windows, even that one. So right when the window frames start, the silver window frames, that is where the awnings stop. Am I correct on that, Mike? Yeah.
In the picture is accurate.
Yeah, looking at the height of that, actually, I'm actually less concerned about something covering this when I see it in context with the doors, because
Right.
no one's going to be looking in around that window.
No, they're not.
But if that were covered in a couple of the other
Oh,
windows
is
on
it?
each side,
That's
you
fine.
could get more coverage, much more than 20%. You could get some symmetrical coverage, and I don't mean these ones.
No.
Yeah,
I mean like
nothing
out,
No, it's these two with the
windows
sunglasses.
further out on each side.
Yeah.
Right, and then maybe every other one type thing on that, yeah.
Through the chair, I think if the board is leaning towards a approval motion, the applicant would have to come back in and just give us the total square footage of glass, essentially.
That's
So
gonna
whatever.
be covered.
So yeah, so I hear a
We
few
would know
different
the
percentage.
exact percentage.
Yes, yeah. So I hear a few percentage numbers being tossed out. It'll just have to be
Well,
probably an up to amount or, agreed upon amount.
I guess the way I want to look at this right now is that there's 6 items that they were going to put up, and we're only talking about, 12 items that they're talking about putting up, and we're only talking 6. Does
We
that,
don't
if that
know the-
helps you?
well,
But
we-
we don't know the dimensions.
Right, because of the way
Yeah.
the ordinance is drafted, they would have to
So
know
it'd
the
be
dimensions.
4 windows, because it'd be every other one, and then maybe where the sunglasses are.
And you could potentially say also, like, a percentage of window surface, not including the doors, because it sounded like.
For sure. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, this way I don't have to come back?
Right.
That would be doable.
But we don't know the percentage.
Right,
I think
so
that's
it
the
is
hard
kind of
part
a-
for us.
It is sort of a guessing.
Yeah.
Well, if you do half the windows, which I would like if you did all the windows, but if you do half the windows, that's obviously 50% of the windows, but then if you're not doing the doors, that's probably around 40% if you're sticking to the glasses, but we're safe at 50, I think, excluding around the doors.
I can support 50, excluding the doors.
Okay, if we give this variance to this building, does that mean other buildings will then ask us for the same variance?
Yes. But they
Or
have to
can
show
we
the same
say it's
conditions.
particular, condition it to this building, like they got their conditional
So-
zoning?
Sure, so I would ask that if the board is considering an approval motion, that findings, to add to the findings, so it would be finding number 3, I guess. You would add, so the list that Chair Williamson listed off, so variances may be granted for any of the one following reasons. So 1 and 2, I would cite, the specific topographic issues with 8 Mile and the service drive there. Number 2, the large building, large size of the frontage or building, and then listing the standards in number 4 in the ordinance. All of those would have to be met too. So that would be adding 3 findings to the motion, and those sub-letters would be included too.
But it would be specific to this property
Right.
rather than giving a variance to any property to do the
Right.
same thing.
Because not everyone who may request that has this sort of
Unique
circumstance, yes.
Well, and the
Just want to
more,
make sure.
yeah, generally, the more findings we add for why we're approving this, the more closed that loop gets.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I, through the chair, so originally on June 21st of 2016, I asked if you were in the top 1% of people in your category, and you said C3, correct?
Yes.
I'm looking at the C3 zones, and I don't really see anything that comes close to your size other than Honda, which has a ridiculous amount of signage. It has 2 signs that are at least as big as yours, and then like an entire giant logo. I don't know how this one has so many, but I'm wondering if there was some, I don't know, variance passed for them that you could tag onto.
Might be pre-existing.
It's
Honda's been
pre-existing.
around a long time.
That Honda sign has been around
been
for a
there.
long time. All they've been doing is maintaining it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just, because I remember on the first one, we had talked about, like you said, breaking it into 2 locations because you wanted 75 feet, I believe, and you were only allowed 40, and that would have been, if you had doubled it, you would have had 80, you would have been within that. And I think you did take our advice to make it straight, I think, so that, thank you. But I would also be inclined to approve. I drive by that, as you know, as you do every day, all the time. Or not every day, but it is definitely hard to see. And I think you could even work in something a certain distance from the railroad track underpass, because that makes it very specific to that location. So then anyone has to be within, how far are you from that railroad underpass?
Probably 100 yards.
100 yards? 1 football field? Okay, so within or up to 100 yards from the railroad overpass.
A little more, so we have to be specific.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be included.
I don't know the exact.
Yeah, I don't know either.
It's close, but the underpass is part of the process of coming through that area. And you kind of have to keep an eye because you're turning under there and going down. Topographically, you are dipping
Yeah,
or coming up if you're coming the other way.
correct. So it's a safety thing too.
Oh, Justin says it's 610 feet from the door to the railroad.
More or less.
So every 3 feet is a yard? So it'd be 200 yards?
100 yards to the middle of my building.
Okay, so maybe 200 yards then.
Yeah, that should work.
Okay, so I guess do people feel like,
Not fine.
should I start to make a motion?
Number of signs or windows, I would just.
Right.
Including it? Oh, I see.
Right, so I'm thinking I might get it started with trying to throw out a motion and then see what,
Excluding the doorways. And let him take which windows.
oh, you're crafting a motion over there.
I'm playing around with
Oh, I was just gonna throw one out and then,
this. I'll go ahead. Here, can I throw this issue?
alright, okay.
Because you have more specifics in the conditions.
So, where am I?
And this is what Justin would like included in the findings of fact.
You got to do with the findings of facts using these, please.
I'm gonna try. Okay, so I motion that the dimensional variance application to allow a variance of up to 50% from the 20% maximum size requirement at 1461 East 8 Mile Road, Sidwell number 24-25-35-459-006, after a public hearing was held as set and published for this date and place. The motion is accompanied by the following facts and findings. Sorry, the facts come first.
Well, are you on this?
Yeah. That the,
Hang on, I'm sorry.
oh, so just go through all of it.
Yeah.
That the applicant has demonstrated a variance is needed due to a practical difficulty on the site resulting from varied topography, road curvature along 8 Mile, the presence of the railroad overpass over 8 Mile, the fact that the site is partially located within 200 feet of the overpass, 200 yards of the overpass, decreasing visibility, that the variance is warranted due to the relatively large size of the site, as noted in the fact that it's in the top 1% of commercial square footage, and, oh, we only need one of those, okay. And then, I'm sorry guys, I'm struggling.
No, you're
It's
fine,
okay,
you're
you can
doing
have
good.
both.
Okay,
It's,
doing
the
good.
findings of fact are better if they're more
Okay,
specific,
well, so
so I
both-
think both is fine.
both of those are true. And then, the following standards have also been met. The inability to conform with the regulations is due to a practical difficulty, and a unique condition, that includes more than mere inconvenience or mere inability to attain a supposed higher, financial return. Do I have to say why right now, or just go to the next one? Like, do I say the findings now?
I would say the conditions.
Oh, okay, so the unique condition being the limited visibility by the previously stated, conditions. That the alleged practical difficulties or unique condition or both are exceptional and peculiar to the property of the person requesting the variance and result from conditions which do not exist generally throughout the city, as noted previously. That allowing the variance will result in substantial justice being done considering the public benefits intended to be secured by the regulations, the individual practical difficulties that will be suffered by a failure to grant a variance, and the rights of others whose property would be affected by the allowance of the variance and will not be contrary to the public purpose and general intent of these regulations, that the variance granted is the minimum necessary, as discussed, 50% was the minimum, to allow the applicant to have a reasonable outlet for free speech and meet the intent of these sign regulations, and the variance will not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, with the following findings, that the, what?
Conditions, not findings.
Oh, I'm sorry, when do I say the findings?
You just did.
You just did.
Oh, I wanted more findings, okay.
We can add more. Since you had more findings, you wanted to-
With the following conditions, that the center window between, oh, we weren't saying that one. With the following conditions, that two windows, with the following conditions, that the doors themselves not be included, and the windows on the sides of the doors, those insets, that you can have up to 50% total, that the decals themselves are see-through from the inside looking out. That's all I have, I think. Sorry, guys, I really struggled
that's
with
okay.
that. What?
No, she's.
And then if anyone wants to second or amend that, I would happily take amendments to that.
First it has to be seconded, so I'll
Okay.
second that.
We have a motion
And I'll
offered.
second.
It's by Commissioner Deasy, seconded by Commissioner Palmer.
Now
And
discussion.
now let's open this for discussion with the board.
Could those conditions be read again?
Okay. So, I'm sorry, the conditions that I put on it were that, the doors and the windows,
On either side,
On either side of the door.
yeah,
do not get covered.
yes.
There's supposed to be a door here.
Do not get covered.
By which I mean, like, in the inset where the door is. Okay. Not the next inset over. That they can have up to 50% of the total windows covered.
Sorry, clarification.
Yeah.
Remaining windows.
Remaining windows.
Okay, thank you.
And that the decals that they use must be, see-through, I guess is the word, from the inside looking out.
Okay. Was that seconded?
Yes, I'll
Okay,
second
okay.
it. So
'Cause I'd second that.
basically, just so that you know, because we're in discussion, it would be a total of 5 windows?
Well, that wasn't
No,
the motion.
No,
that wasn't the
no.
motion. It's
Yeah.
50%.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't include that part, but if anyone wants to amend it, I didn't necessarily see the necessity of.
Yeah, it's. you make
Okay, the
motion as you see
50%.
fit.
Through
This is
the-
the motion that's on the table. It's open for discussion. Any board members want to have comments or questions or want to propose amendments? You're welcome to do so.
Just, do we have to add, I know she stated it, that was one of the findings, but do we have to add it as a condition about the 200 yards to the overpass?
That wouldn't be a condition. That was a finding of fact that was offered in justification of
Okay,
granting
just as
variance.
long as it applies to whoever comes next. That's
Yeah.
all I want to
We
make
don't
sure.
do this.
Finding of fact that shows a unique condition of the property.
Okay.
Should we also put a unique condition about MDOT having,
Ownership of.
ownership? Yes, because that limits alternatives in the parking lot.
Are you proposing that as an amendment to the motion?
Yes,
That
I
we
am.
also mentioned in the findings of fact that some of the property adjacent, or some of the land adjacent to the property is owned by MDOT, which limits the applicant's ability to put additional signage on the property.
Yes.
Would you accept that friendly amendment?
I'll accept that.
Will you accept that, Commissioner Palmer?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's add that into the findings of fact. Additional comments, questions?
Through the chair, if I can ask a clarifying question.
Sure.
In the variance, in the variance approval motion, was the phrasing to say, approve the dimensional variance application to allow a variance of up to 50% from the 20% maximum, or was it phrased as a, up to 50% of the glass surface?
No, she said up to 50% of the 20%.
No,
I mean-
up to 50% of the glass surface.
No, but she used the word 20%
Right.
in something.
So I think I was intending to say 50% of the glass surface
With the conditions as stated in the
Okay.
motion.
with the conditions as stated in the
I just wanted to be
motion.
sure that we were, because the way I have phrased the initial motion anyway was to allow a variance of 80% from the 20% maximum. I wanted to make sure we weren't saying 50% from the 20%, which would add up to 70%. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't the.
No, I think it's
Okay.
30%.
Yes, I apologize. It's up to 50% of the remaining glass windows, not including the doors.
Cool.
But the variance of 8, this is just.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that would be
yeah.
50% from the 20%.
Basically 5 total.
So is that the verbiage that you would prefer, is what is
Just
written here?
30% from the 20% maximum. I
The
think.
variance we're granting is 30%. I said
Just-
50%.
just to be-
Gotcha.
Understood.
Because we're granting a variance of 30% to allow them up to 50% window coverage on the remaining windows, not including the doors.
I'll second that.
All right. Further comments, questions? I will note that as proposed, this motion would allow the applicant to apportion that coverage as the applicant sees fit. So it could be half of each one of the windows on the facade. It could be full coverage of several windows on the facade. It could be any other questions, amendments? All right, let's do a roll call vote.
You sure?
Okay, hold on, let me get this, one little piece in here. I can't find Leah. Okay. Okay. Let's see, Coulson,
Yes.
Steidemann,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Polika,
Yes.
Williamson,
No.
Deasy.
Yes.
All right, looks like the motion passes. I would have preferred that it be limited to specific windows, but I'm just one person on the board. Everyone else was okay with you having the ability to allocate these as you see fit. You have your variance up to 50%.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody.
Alrighty.
Thanks, Mark. Good to see you again.
Windows, so you don't have to worry, it'll be every other full window.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I would have welcomed that comment as well.
As a board, or as the
As the
chair,
chair.
I don't offer amendments, and that's fine. I mean, it's
No,
like I
but you
said.
could have under discussion said that.
Well, I did, made the clarification to make sure everyone was okay with it. It appeared that everyone was okay with the motion as stated, and, you know, you all have your own opinions. I have my opinion, and it looks like we all win because he's going to do what I want anyway.
To be clear, I want that as well. I was erring on the side of giving him the ability to designate which windows.
Sure, which is fair.
Yeah.
That's a reasonable viewpoint, I think. Let's take a look and see. So that concludes our public hearing on 1461 East 8 Mile Road. And that moves us on to communications and announcements. Do we have anything from staff?
Nothing really of note. We are getting closer to providing some amendments to the mixed-use zoning district. Now would probably provide some clarification on that as well.
Yeah, that's
so
probably a good idea.
I'll provide us follow-up to the board about what those amendments include. We're
Great.
going to discussion with planning commission, so nothing really to share right yet. And then there was a request recently brought forth to city council from a variance request that was denied earlier this summer on Saratoga Street regarding a residential expansion. The applicant at the time wanted to expand further backward, and it didn't meet the side yard setback ordinance, despite some of the ordinances being changed. The residential amendments, I'm going to provide a memo basically that explains everything in more detail, but essentially that amendment allowed for people to, non-conforming structures to build upward, not outward.
Right.
And so the applicant wasn't satisfied with his decision that was here. Staff's been going back and forth and providing him the information. There's a memo that's going to go to the city council, BZA, and planning commission to clarify that. We looked at the ordinance one more time between fire, building, and planning, and we still recommend that, we know there's a lot of non-conforming situations in the city. Between building and fire and planning, we don't recommend that we allow those nonconformities to continue and, take up a large portion of the backyard. We felt that, adding that upper level and fire rated construction would probably not solve everyone's issues as it didn't with the applicant at the June meeting, but so we still stand by the recommendation. We'll share that memo. Really looking forward to anyone's thoughts and feedback on that.
Great. All right, anyone
I
else?
just have one question for open discussion. Olive's Bloom Box put up replaced their fence. It used to be a chain link fence. Now it's like I believe like a giant black iron fence. And I just wanted to know, I was not present for that meeting, and I don't remember there ever being a meeting around that. So I just wanted to see if anyone recalled that.
I don't think it was them. I think it was the guy that owns the building next to him,
Correct.
because that was not allowing them to use the parking lot.
Correct.
It was a whole big, once again, the
Yeah.
buyer didn't do their due diligence when purchasing the property.
They didn't realize that they didn't own the parking lot.
Yeah.
This came to planning
No,
commission,
that's
I
not
think.
what-
on
That's
site plan.
a
That's the
different
issue.
case. Yeah, that's a different case.
Okay.
It used to be a
So
chain
we're
link
thinking of a
fence.
different one, okay.
I think what you're
Yeah.
getting to is, you're talking about, it used to be a chain link fence, but it was a seasonal corner.
Right.
And they replaced it now with a black iron gate-like fence.
Which is fine if it was
Which
approved.
should
I
be
just want to make
approved,
sure that someone did and they didn't just do it and no one noticed and
No.
like, that's not really fair to everyone else that has to follow the rules, so.
It came to us. I
It
can
came
recall,
to-
3 years ago, 2 years ago?
More recently, so it came to city council, and city council approved the license
Okay.
to do that. And then also the fencing there is a bit different in that because it's for like display storage, it's different than the parking lot and like screen wall fencing that is required, that applicant, the neighbors to the Bloom Box requested, so they moved forward as they were allowed to.
I think it's different between residential and commercial also.
Yes, and it's
I remember seeing it.
Well,
though.
and
It
correct
did
me
come
if I'm-
before someone.
Well, you're on
city
council.
council.
Well, you're
Okay. Oh.
That would explain why.
You're too busy.
There or anywhere else.
You're too busy.
Remind him that he was on.
I don't know.
I think that's really
Because
good.
Justin's like, it came
No,
to
no,
city
no, I
council,
know,
he's like, I
that's
saw
pretty
it.
funny, Craig.
But correct me if I'm wrong,
I was thinking it had gone
I feel like, did you say to
Oh,
me
then I
once
would say,
before
come on,
that
Ian.
sort of the reason that that's allowed and that approval went through city council is because
Thanks.
that area that's being fenced in is actually considered to be like part of the building, not really exterior to the,
It's considered part of their like storage, and so it is kind of part of the building. But the reason it went to city council is because it's city, there's like a sliver of property that is city-owned land, and the existing fence was in there, and city council chose to approve and continue that use there. So, I mean, if city council ever wanted to say, you know what, we'd rather, you remove that fence, it's our property, they would have to do so. And they signed an agreement knowing that, or the license agreement knowing that too, so.
Yeah, Livernois has some very strange city-owned lots. Like, there's a really skinny one at, like, is it Leroy? No, not Leroy, because they built that house at Leroy. One of those, there's a real skinny area, and the homeowner still has to maintain it because the city doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, Hilton has some interesting,
Yeah, that's true, too.
interesting property lines too, so, yeah. I think they were all meant to be, 6-lane highways at some point. which I'm
Or
glad-
parking lots.
Or parking lots, and I'm glad it's neither, but.
All right. Anything else?
Thank you, I think we did good tonight. There's a lot of.
wait, I have one more question for Justin.
right.
Sorry. You mentioned that mixed-use zoning changes is coming up really soon. Are there additional, so other than, you'll bring us a memo and also the general public access that we have at city council and planning commission meetings, will there be other opportunities for community engagement and for people to engage with that process of developing the amendments if they want to?
Yes, so I mean, it'll all be done at the planning commission level. So discussions, I mean, the next discussion will either be the 7th or the 14th. So that will be the primary spot to do so.
Okay, so no community engagement outside of planning commission for
Not
those
really,
specific?
not really. It's kind of a wider, I mean, it's kind of a massive, not massive, but it would be, I'd say unrealistic, I think, for staff to do that across all of these districts for that. But we are, I mean, people are more than welcome to come to the planning commission, and it's just a continuation of the conversation we've been having, in which people did participate. I want to say it was the June or July meeting, I want to say. So we got good feedback there.
Any final questions, Leah?
I'm good, thank you.
All right. Board of Zoning Appeals meeting will adjourn at 9:20.